Okay, we're going to start now from page Kuf Lamed Dalid, Os Ches. Os Ches. Al Pizeh Yesh Levar Kesher V'Seder Ha'inyanim Ba'Maimer. Based on all the above, we can explain the connection and the order of the concepts in the previous Rebbe's Maimer, Bebira Pasuk Va'ata Tetzave. In explaining the verse that is under question here, Va'ata Tetzave, you shall command the Jewish people. First, we explain the meaning of the word Va'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael Moshe hu mekasher mechaber es b'nei Yisrael im orin sof. Right? Ata Tetzave means you shall not only you shall command, but you shall join. And so we said that the function here is that Moshe will join the Jewish people with the orin sof. Al yedei shehu zanam mefaris es amunah. And how does he do that? He joins them to the orin sof by feeding them their faith. La'acharei zeh mevar shegam ro'ei Yisrael shebechol dor. Then he explained after this, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Jewish people, the shepherds of the Jewish people in every generation, not just Moshe, but every generation, he's Pashtusa de Moshe, the extension of Moshe in every generation, Mechazkim es amunah Yisrael. They too strengthen the faith. K'ma Mordechai, Moshe Shabadoro, just like Mordechai, he points out in particular, who was the Moshe of his generation, Chizek es munasam shel Yisrael amor chazak b'lim v'nator v'kiyum mitzvahs. He strengthened the faith so they should stand strong on Torah mitzvahs. Achrei zeh mevara perish b'kasos lamar. After this, he comes with the explanation of what we call the continuation of the verse Va'ata Tetzave, which ends with the concept of kasis lamar, crushed to reach the luminary. Whereas the verse Va'ata Tetzave as Bnei Yisrael v'yikchoi lecha shemen zayin zach, right? The actual verse Va'ata Tetzave is talking about Moshe himself in the Midbar, right? And so going on, basically explaining the verse kasis lama'or, crushed to reach the luminary. In Moshe's days, they weren't crushed, right? That Moshe is able to bring out the ma'or, the essence, the luminary of the Jewish people, which is really the essence of the soul. It mainly shows itself not in Moshe himself, but in his extension of Moshe in the time of exile. That's what means kasis, to be crushed. She'oro Yisrael koach b'siris nefesh, because he has the power to bring forth their, as we just said in the introduction, their mesiris nefesh. That is how you truly reveal the essence of the soul, not just by internalizing your faith and understanding God and living by it, but it's primarily when it's challenged with under fire, and when Moshe of the generation is able to do that, he's like fully played the role of the Raya Mahemna. Now, tzrich lahavin, we have to understand. Lefi biranal, according to what we said earlier, the inyan kasis lamar shaykh levata tetzave as bnei Yisrael, that the notion of being crushed to reach the luminary is connected to you shall command, i.e., join the Jewish people. And we said, what does it mean that Moshe and his extension joins the Jewish people to the Orin Sof? But Kasiv Nemar Kasis Lamar. Now, this is going to take us to a new question. We're going to be trying to answer this question until the end of the Maimer. Right? Again, it's like a technicality in the verses. You have to sort of put your thinking cap on. What's the question again? We didn't do it yet. Because in the verse it says, Kasis Lamaor behemshech leviyicho elecha shemen zayizach. So we finally, after painstakingly beating this concept out, we finally understood that Moshe is connecting the Jewish people, right? And then that's what it means Va'ata Tetzave. And then that pasuk, let's just go through that pasuk real quick. Va'ata Tetzave es bnei Yisrael, vayikcho elecha shemen zayizach, Kasis Lamaor. So we have there, Ata Tetzave is the notion of joining the Jewish people. Kasis Lamaor, which basically there's three parts of the verse, right? Ata Tetzave, Vayikcho Elecha, they shall bring you olive oil, and Kasis Lamaor. What we've just established is that Ata Tetzave is talking about Moshe joining the Jewish people. Kasis Lamaor, crushed to the luminary, which is at the end of the verse, is talking about Moshe doing that in his extension in a time of exile. Because when you're crushed, you reach the luminary. The question we now have is, of course, on the middle part, right? That it says they shall bring you olive oil. Why is that now thrown in the middle of the conversation? We finally sorted out how the first part and the last part of the verse have what to do with each other. It's called Moshe and his extension every generation. Now in the verse it says crushed to reach the luminary is a continuation of the middle, which says Vayikro elech Hashem and Zayizak, that they will bring Moshe olive oil. We already said before that Yikro elecha, that they will bring you, that you're going to command them they should bring you the oil. This that the Jewish people are going to bring oil to Moshe is that the Yisrael Mosifim Tosafos or b'Moshe, is that we add light to Moshe. We already said that before. Moshe connects us, then we bring him something back, right? Just like the feet, like sign on for the mission of the head, and that brings an elevation to the head itself. The head now has motion, right? So our question is, why do we need to know in the middle of this conversation that Moshe is going to connect us, right? And then at the end of it, it says, and his extension primarily is going to connect us in a time of exile. Why is it brought in the middle of that conversation that Moshe is going to be added on, right? So why is it so significant that Moshe gains something from this in the middle of this conversation? Tess. Okay, so this piece right here, just a little intro. The Rebbe now really turns on the heat in this paragraph, explaining why really this is his last mimer, right? Because he's now going to define the uniqueness of our generation compared to previous generations, arguably all the generations that ever were before ours, right? This is his last mimer. This is his last mimer.
At the end of this thing.
That he handed out and he gave to us. Tess. So he says, Vehine hakasuv v'kibel Yehudim es asher yechilu la'asos. The verse in the Megillah, this whole thing is based on, which is that the Jewish people accepted that which they began to do, right? At Purim, they finally accepted that which they began to do at Har Sinai. Mendaber b'pashtus b'azman shel achrei nes de Purim. When you actually read the Megillah, and that verse comes out and is spoken, when in the storyline of the Megillah is that verse said? When is it said that the Jewish people actually received that which they began to do at Har Sinai? It was actually after the miracle of Purim was over. In other words, that the Haman's sons had already been hung, and the salvation already took place. After that happens in the story, there's another chapter or two, like sort of summing up the Megillah and telling us like the status of life after the miracle happened, right? And amongst those verses, it says the Jewish people finally accepted that which they began to do at the time of Har Sinai. V'yesh Shlomer, we have to say, that what the Frierdiker Rebbe was talking about in his mimer, when it says the explanation that we finally took upon ourselves that which we began to do at Har Sinai, who should be Yemei Achashverosh kiblu masha heichel matan Torah, that right? Who gam lefi pashtus hakasav shvikibul haya achrei nes. We have to say that must also be referring to the simple story of the Megillah, right? There's this idea of kimu v'kiblu in the Gemara. This notion that we received, we sort of ratified that which we received before. That was already like an ancient concept that's found in the Gemara of Megillah, right? But the Frierdiker Rebbe sort of like brought that same idea out of a new pasuk in the Megillah. That's sort of the chiddush of this thing. And this pasuk, Kibul HaYehudim, that's where he takes not Kimu v'Kiblu, but in the later part of the Megillah it says Kiblu, it says v'Kibul HaYehudim, right? He says, if the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying that that's when we actually ratified the Torah, it must be in accordance with the simple meaning of the Megillah, which is that it was actually ratified after the main story was over.
We're talking about because it's included in the Tanakh, you're saying? Because we ratified meaning complete in the Tanakh?
No, it means we actually accepted the Torah in full.
I thought we were talking about the Mesiras Nefesh of them like they didn't have to see any of these miracles, but they still had these Mesiras Nefesh.
Exactly. So it's puzzling.
At the end when they already had all these miracles.
Very puzzling. You hit it on the head. That's what the Rebbe is getting at. In other words, seemingly this is strange. The whole purpose of the Frierdiker Rebbe's mind was to say that we were like specifically under the gun, and we were having Mesiras Nefesh. It was crazy. Like Haman was everywhere, right? And that's why, because we didn't see the miracles and we were in such a Mesiras Nefesh state, we were, merited to reach the essence. Here he comes to say, Rebbe says, hey, take a second look. when it comes down to it, the actual verse is not in the middle of the nightmare, right? It was when the nightmare was over and things were relatively calm. And there it says, we received and ratified that which we began to do. So now we got a problem here. Although the Rebbe wants to say, let's not make it a problem. Let's deepen the conversation that even in so to speak, after the miracle was over, that's when the Torah was received in full.
Instead of
in the midst of the chaos. Based on this, we could say that this that we received in the days of Achashverosh, the Torah in full, there's actually two matters at hand here. So one is what we've been talking about the whole time, the obvious one, which is that we received the Torah specifically in the time of the tremendous decrees where we had to live and die with our faith. And that's what the Friedrich Rebbe openly speaks about in the Maimer, right? Then there was a second, and we're going to see a deeper actual receptance of the Torah after the need to die for God was actually behind us. And we didn't need that Mesiras Nefesh in the same way. And what the Rebbe wants to point out is that acceptance of the Torah that happened after our lives were no longer in jeopardy was actually a greater, higher level acceptance of the Torah than it was even when we were fleeing persecution and standing with our lives on the line, which is a big chiddush. And just, why do I say that this is something the Rebbe is now pointing to our generation? Because the Rebbe is basically going to show that this is sort of where our generation falls on the map, right? We, fortunately, did not just live through physically and watch, Haman rise up and murder 6 million, Yeah, and communism and like all the really harsh, terrible, recent memories, they really were in a previous generation. By the time our parents even got to the shores of America, that level of having to die mamish every day, waking up, you think you might die because you're a Jew, was not really our experience. So the Rebbe is saying so I guess we're off the hook, right? And he's saying, look in the Megillah. There's also in the Megillah, which it discusses the two types of generations. One where Haman is mamish like out at your throat with a knife, and one when the miracle happened. They hung Haman and his 10 children, the Nuremberg trials, it's all over, freedom for the Jews. And yet in the actual story of the Megillah, that's when the verse comes in and says the Jewish people received finally the Torah, not in the time of danger, in the time of relative freedom. And this is the Rebbe's Maimer, right? This isn't the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. The Friedrich Rebbe didn't speak about that because that wasn't his business. His business was trying to strengthen the Jewish people in the midst of mamish, bringing them to a state of Mesiras Nefesh, right? And his Maimer was that Moshe, when he brings you to a state of Mesiras Nefesh and you have to die for Hashem, it's even higher than Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So the Rebbe doesn't have that vort, right? Because that's not seemingly what the Rebbe's job was, to bring the Jewish people to be willing to die under the threat of communism. He already sort of more or less lived after that, or ruled after that. So the same is true when it comes to the concept of being crushed to reach the luminary. In other words, are we not crushed? Only in the times of Hitler, Yimach Shemo, and Stalin, Yimach Shemo, that's when we were crushed. We're not crushed. So he says, when it comes to crush, in the kasis, guess what? When it comes to crushedness, there's also two conversations, right? That when you're in gullus and you have to therefore be crushed and therefore reach the luminary, there's two ways of being crushed, and therefore there's sort of two aspects of the luminary, the essence of your soul. When we're crushed in the first way, because there's literal decrees against you fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, that they mamash had to go and hide in underground caves to teach their children, and they had to send the women to mikvahs that were mamash literally caves and secret hiding places, right? I'm talking about in Stalin's Russia. And the Rebbe says, as the case was when my father-in-law said his Maimer. It was a completely different, the same Maimer, but like the surrounding world was completely different, and therefore the message of the Raya Mehemna, whose job it is to strengthen the faith, was slightly a different message. So he says, when there's a true decree on the Torah mitzvahs, meaning that there's gezeras, there's decrees against us. Right? So that's one way of reaching to your essence, your ma'or, through your actual Mesiras Nefesh. But there's another Indian of Kasis Lama'or, there's another concept of what it means b'chlal to be crushed, to reach the luminary. Even when we find ourselves in a state of relative peace, harchava actually means more than peace. It's like broad, good digs. You got your private planes and you got your special, anything you want, right? It's like mamash, the world is laid out. There's the Jew. It's not so hard to be a Jew today, in theory, right? Harchava bagashmias v'gam harchava baruchnis. Not only do you have your private planes, you got your fanciest mikvahs. You go and you have a hachnasa sefer Torah, the finest meats. The whole city and all the goyim are going to malava you with. It's like, spiritually speaking, also you have everything you need. We're in a generation that has like unprecedented access to Torah, right? You have a question in Torah, you don't have to ask the rabbi anymore. You can just Google it. You find 750 different opinions and the final psak. Like, you're good to go. Torah has never been so easy. Life at Bagashmias has never been so easy. So even when the Jew finds himself in a situation of great, good situation on earth, but nimtzayim b'galus, guess what? Don't get so excited because you're still in galus. And this is the exact scenario. The Megillah, wow, the mamish unbelievable nevuah of the Megillah, it prophesizes and foretells of our exact situation at the end of the Megillah. Al derech hamatzav shaya achrei nes Purim. This is exactly what happened after the miracle of Purim was over. You might ask yourself, why do we need to hear all these extra pieces of information after the main story of the Megillah is over? Haman hung, Mordechai wins, end, right? But no, there's a whole nother few chapters. It's kind of okay, this is the story's over now, right? No, it's talking about a different reality of the Jewish people after our enemies are defeated, right? It even ends to the point that we mamash have all these wonderful phrases of simcha and joy and happiness, but pashtus gam baruchnias. Not only physically, we were free from our oppressors, but also spiritually. And he says, there's another little verse thrown in there, which is a very deep spiritual concept, is that the house of Haman was given to Esther. It's not just that our enemies were destroyed, it's that we went in and took their stuff, dafka, the stuff of klippa, the stuff of evil. And it was transformed into kedusha, that we basically took the darkness and turned it into light, which is the highest levels, messianic level stuff. Not quite, right? But there's the concept of what's called hishapcha, that we're not just denying the expression of evil, but we're actually got to a point where we can pull the kedusha out of it and transform those things into holiness itself. And that was a state that we got to in the time of the Purim story. Largely, you could say the same thing today, the way we spoke about America, right? What is America? America is Edom, right? America is Rome. America is Esav. America is our twin brother that's trying to kill us for all time, right? And the Rebbe turns around and lives in America. He says, hey, Rome's not bad anymore. He says, this is called Medina Shel Chesed. He said, this is a country of kindness. And all they do is mamish give things away. This same Gevurah, Esav's called Gevurah, right? He's like that with the sword. And okay, they got a big army, but what do? Most of the time they're just delivering food packages to all countries of the world, including the Jewish people, including giving their sword to us and giving us billions of dollars of planes and missiles and stuff. This is Esav? We don't even recognize him. This is a total transformation of the evil in our times, and we're living in it as well. But what does the Gemara ultimately say? Don't get so excited. We're still slaves to Achashverosh. The Purim story does not end with us going back and building the Beis HaMikdash and living as free people in our own country. It ends with us being very honored citizens of a country which is our oppressors. Right? Yeah, they gave us the house of Haman, all the gold and silver we want, but who's in charge? So they say, Mi berosh, Achashverosh. Right? And that's the idea, is we're still in Galus. So even though the Purim story ends with greatness in physical and spiritual for the Jewish people, it also is actually telling you a tale of exile and a tale of oppression nonetheless. Hem shvurim v'nidakim kasis mizen Shem. And don't think that a Jew who has fancy mikvahs and the best meats and all the missiles that Esav can build is a happy Jew, so to speak. Because they're still broken and crushed kasis from the fact that they're in gullus. This is not, our spirit is not okay just because you have a good meal in front of you. And just like we said before, kasis lema'or, when we were crushed, when his sword was at our neck, it was obvious that we basically pulled new powers out of ourselves and stood strong in our faith and reached the essence of our soul to stay Jewish, to stay religious. So is the same truth is found when we're crushed, kasis, even when the sword is not at our neck. The concept of being crushed from the very fact that we're in gullus also enables us to reach the ma'or, and as we're going to see, an even deeper relationship with the ma'or, with the luminary.
We saying we're crushed now or we're not crushed?
We're crushed, baby. You're not crushed.
No.
You're crushed.
I hope I'm not. I'm not going to speak for
We're all crushed.
No, yeah, we've been through a lot, I understand, but I'm saying...
No, we're going through a lot presently. That's the point he's trying to make. Even when you have the house of Haman,
No, but we just...
and you got your fancy mikveh, Chaim, you're crushed.
But I don't care about that. I really don't. I don't care what the
Okay, but it's better. It's better than having a sword against your neck,
It's not bad.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Va'inyan hu ha'inyan hu dezeh Yisrael hem shvurim mizeh shem b'galus. This that we're crushed just merely being in gullus. Gam kishesh lemar chav b'gashmis v'ruchnes. Even when we have everything we need spiritually and physically. Hu ki ratzono amiti shel kol echad miYisrael. Why? How do you know? How do I know you're crushed, Chaim? How do I know that even though you have everything you need, it's not enough? We're crushed. Why? Because the true will of every single Jew, Shia Gilui Elokus, is that there should be total revelation of godliness. Like, this is what we want. We can't live without it. You might be in a state of total inner exile and not realize that that's what you want. But what he's talking about is your subconscious desires and needs. Like you need air for your animal soul, and your body cannot live without air. Your godly soul really cannot live. And it's totally crushed without there being a state of godly revelation in the world. Right? When you see that the evil is on the rise, and there's not like the truth and freedom and the reality of Torah is basically like ruling a particular situation or election or government, whatever it is. We have some hot topics on the table here. We can't stand it. Like our souls react to this as though we're suffocating. Literally, whether there's godliness revealed around you or not, is connected to your very existence. The fact that when you're in Gullus, even though you got your fancy mixers and your fine meats, but it's not shining a revelation of godliness throughout the world, like there was in the temple, when Mamash, you could go and see Solomon's temple and Mamash, fire from heaven, and the Jewish people like operating our empire and the whole world recognizing the truth of God in the world. Anytime that's not in place, in other words, we're particularly, he says, we're slaves to a Chashverosh at some level or another. Particularly when you meditate upon this sad fact, where it says, "Kol mi shelo nivna beis hamikdash biyamav, harizeh ki'ilu nechrav biyamav." Any generation or any individual who does not literally see the Beis Hamikdash with his eyes being built, he should realize that it's as if he's seeing it being torn down and burned and destroyed. In other words, you can't just be like, oh well, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed long ago, and when I come into the city of Jerusalem, I can still enjoy, the fine wall and the nice tunnel tours, and maybe I'll grab a nice hot mikveh while I'm there, and there's 4 or 5 different kosher shawarma restaurants. I got everything I need, but you're looking at mamash, a Beis Hamikdash in flames in front of your eyes, and you're supposed to meditate, said the sages. If you're not seeing it be rebuilt, imagine your eyes watching that thing come down. The mamash, the jewel of creation, the jewel of beyond creation, and this is what we're seeing every day. So you're happy, you got everything, you're good to go, you're not crushed. Think again, right? You just not realize how crushed you are. You're completely crushed. Kasis to triselt. Sorry. Even if you yourself personally are on a very high level, You don't touch any tuma. You don't go near dead bodies. You hold yourself. You're a Nazir Eloki, right? You think you've got to some kind of a level of greatness. And let's say you even did actually get to a level of greatness. Sit, learn Torah 17, 24 hours a day, whatever it is. Shemeir etzlo gili lukus. That by you, your mamish connected to God. You have nothing. Your energy is flowing, and your mamish have it all. But dugmas like gilish. You are literally like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who in his life, even though the temple was destroyed, you experienced the temple being like there, right? It says that Rabbi Shimon, even after the temple was destroyed, he saw and experienced a world that the temple was built. It's because, and theoretically, let's say you got there, man, right? You're on such a level that by you, there's Gili Elokus, just like there was in the times of Beis HaMikdash. Because there is such a thing. Let's say the Rebbe actually had that going on, right? He brings in a footnote here, like the Rashbi. It was not destroyed in his perspective of reality at all. So even such an individual like that, who's actually reached true spiritual enlightenment, Mikom Makom, nevertheless, since the whole world is not experiencing that, that it must be, like, in other words, it's like a mathematical reality, that if the whole world does not experience what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is experienced, it must be that what Rabbi Shimon is experienced is itself limited. Why? How can you notice he's not really where he thinks he is. It's not as good as he thinks it is. Why? Because if it was truly shining, the Or Ein Sof, which is unlimited, and he really actually had access to that light, it would have been everywhere, right? If it's a truly unlimited light, it doesn't make sense that it's only found by you or by this guy. So even a person who's literally spiritually on the highest level he could possibly be, but the very fact that not everybody is on that level means that even the one who is on that level does not actually have the level that he thinks he has. Because the true light is not available. If it was, it would be available for everybody because it would be unlimited. If there's one little place in the world, even like some pushed off corner of the world no one's caring about, but in that little place they have a little, dark area of absence of godly light. They didn't send a shliach there yet. It's because the revelation, even in the place where it is shining, it is a gilui mugba. And you see that the Rebbe's the Rebbe's passion about this concept, right? The Rebbe was a person that if he's sitting in his own office over there, he mamish is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And he sees like ultimate endless light that goes from one end of the world to the other, and he knows everything that ever is, was, and will be. But he knows that he's crushed, and there's nothing, he's unsatisfied, and therefore he has to go find some random Jew in Australia and some random Jew in Timbuktu and send people out of their comfort zone to go find them, because he knows that his light is limited so long as there's one dark place left in the world, because it shows that the light that's even available bichlal to anyone, including him, is a limited light. If it's not everywhere, it's nowhere, that level. And so therefore you have to go and make it your business to bring light dafka into the darkest places.
What was that word you used? Giloi Muba?
Mugbal means a limited level of revelation.
How was he receiving from them the light, the oil?
Well, we didn't get to that part yet. What Moshe gets back from them. And this is what it's brought from the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim. It's brought in the Tikkuni Zohar. If there was even one tzaddik that would do the proper tshuva in his generation, Mashiach would come. Right? Because I think what we're dealing with here is someone giving it really their best college try. Right? Like, you have to do such a tshuva that you literally uncover every single dark place. That's why it's so important for us to say from yesterday's class, the Rebbe is still at it. Right? And that's why another 50 shluchim go out every year. Another 250. Last year they've sent out 100 new shluchim. They opened 100 new Chabad houses. Right? 120 for the Rebbe's 120th birthday. Right? Because he's still at it. If one tzaddik will do tshuva, we're putting our money on this guy. Right? If he'll do tshuva, then Mashiach would come.
Doesn't he say we have to do tshuva too?
That's what it means. He gets every single, because the fact that you are yourself are the dark place, so he has to make you do tshuva in order for his tshuva to be complete. Because if a person anyone would do a perfect tshuva, it would usher forth the infinite, endless light of the Or Ein Sof, and it would be everywhere, and Mashiach would come. How do you like that? You literally have the power to bring Mashiach. All you have to do is tshuva shlema, which the Rebbe is still working on it, but we have a shot.
You said the Rebbe is working on it. What do you
My point is that if one tzaddik would reach this level, Mashiach would come.
So you're saying that
So
he reached it?
I'm saying he's busy trying.
He's dead.
What did we say yesterday? He's dead.
Yeah,
You didn't learn anything, young
I
man?
learned that what the rabbi said yesterday is that his spiritual work is keeping on going.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. I said that the fear of Shimshon was literally on his enemies. That's a physical presence of a person, even though you can't see him.
Right. Was that connected to tshuva?
Because it means he's still working. He didn't stop working. So just like when the Rebbe was, you could see him, he was making his business to turn every single dark part of this world into light because he was doing tshuva. One tzaddik would do tshuva properly, he would turn over every single dark part of this world. Well, he's still trying.
So basically,
And he put us on the mission as well.
So the Rebbe came back again.
Where's coming back again? That entails that you left.
No, wait. It says
All right, let's not get lost on that topic. See yesterday's class for further information. The fact that we don't find a full-blown revelation of the Ein Sof, where does that leave you and I? Nishbar v'nidke, kassis. That's the point. Is that you could have mamish Rebbe level light. The Rebbe's talking about himself here, right? Where he literally is seeing illumination. Mamish, he can see through time, and he can see Gilgulim, and he can see mamish things that all the tzaddikim before him combined could see, and he added his own. And yet, the Mashiach is not here in full, which means there's a place left where someone doesn't understand godliness and some Jews not living at the state of total Mesiras Nefesh. You're crushed from the very fact that you're still under Achashverosh's rule. It's not oppression in the sense of Haman having a knife to your neck. No, it's oppression of the fact that godliness is not everywhere all the time. That itself crushes a Jew. It's not really oppression. It's just being crushed over the fact that there's not enough godliness everywhere. He says this can be understood by a sort of analogy that the word for sick in Hebrew, chole, has the gematria of 49, right? Memtes. Shegam k'shemesig memtes sharibina ela shechaser lo shar hanun hu chole. And what's the message that's like hinted into this concept that 49 is the gematria of sick? Because we know 49 is. We just counted the Omer, right? There's 49 gates until you reach the 50th gate. And the 50th, they're called the 50 gates of Bina, which means Hashem has different streams of divine revelation and experience that could come into the world. So if a person has gone and counted all 49 gates, right? Or the world itself has reached a level where Hashem is streaming into the world, 49 levels of Bina, but there's just one missing, it's called chole. It's called sick. In other words, that is a state of it's not a state of like really strong, good health, which you would think it is because you're like mamish seeing Elokus everywhere you go. As long as there's one level that's missing, you're sick, right? And this is literally built into the Jewish language, this concept that sickness is 49. Normally a person would think if they reached 40, you counted your 49 sphera, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, right? No, you're missing the Shar HaNun, even one more gate, you're broken and crushed.
Is the Shar Nun a free gift, or is it that you have to work for it?
Either way, you're crushed. And we know this is also kind of would you mind turning on the air conditioner, somebody? Ruvi, you want to show him where that is, maybe? It's just like, I'm getting crushed just from sitting here.
Man, the Torah is fire.
Thanks, man.
You need to do buses.
Give it a 22. Right? It's known what the Tzemach Tzedek says, the grandson of the Alter Rebbe. That he would go around and say, right, and it was like want to say this thing. Ich was al gar nicht Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, ich will nicht dein Olam Haba, ich will mehr nicht as dich Elaine. Right? It says that he would go and say, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want anything. I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Olam Haba, I just want you alone. So there's many stories that the Alter Rebbe would be like enraptured inside of a mimer, and he would wind up getting so, while he was saying the mimer himself, he would get so lit up by the content of what he was saying that he would just start like rolling around on the floor. This is actual real thing, and there was actually this one of the Hasidim that was appointed to record what he said and memorize it basically, and then write it down later. Just like the Rebbe also had there called Chosrim, he would have to like crawl down on the floor with him while the altar was rolling around and like listen to every single word he would say. They had to put like pillows around so he wouldn't hurt himself bumping into things. He went to like completely lost it, right? And he was heard in these moments and other moments as well, saying these words, right? I don't want anything. I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. I only want you alone, right? And this is the same concept that basically the Alter Rebbe knew what Gan Eden was because he was experiencing these lights. He knew what Olam Haba was. He was flying into the highest levels. And what was he saying? Not, I've got so much energy and I can heal people with my eyes. He was saying, I don't want any of this. This is all like an interruption and a disappointment, because it's all just revelations, and the fact that I'm just dealing with mere revelations, it's hurting me because I want you. And if I'm experiencing one gate, even 49 gates, right? He's crushed because he knows that he doesn't have the essence. And in fact, when you're experiencing revelation in a certain sense, as we said before many times, like blinded by the light. Right? If you are experiencing Gan Eden, then that's sort of a sign that you're not experiencing the essence of Hashem, which is really beyond revelation. Which is really why Hasidim don't get excited about miracles and special superpowers. Even though it says it like in the Bavitch, miracles were falling like rain. It says the Hasidim didn't even have time to bend down and pick them up. Right? Because even though by Hasidim in general, there's a very great emphasis on priding themselves about how their Rebbeim could make miracles, because it is pretty impressive, right? In Chabad, until actually our generation, the Rebbe sort of brought back the significance of miracles for a different reason, which I'll explain later. But in Chabad, the feeling was, we're not excited about our Rebbe because he makes miracles. Like this is not what makes him our Rebbe, and that's not why we're following him, right? Because all this revelations, right, is sort of a secondary thing to the one who's responsible for these revelations, like the Rebbe himself. And the idea is that what is revelations compared to? It's like the light of the Shekhinah in Gan Eden. So what's the idea of the light of the Shekhinah in Gan Eden? Is that all the souls there and the angels are sitting there benefiting from experiencing godly revelation. But here's a problem with that. If you're experiencing godly revelation, that means the revelation itself has confined itself to be able to be understood by you. And if it's confined, even though your mom is experiencing the greatest lights and like miracles and miraculous reality of God, if you can perceive that, it's actually a problem, because it means that what you're perceiving is not really the true God. Because if it was the true God, it would be imperceptible, because he's beyond comprehension. So if you're getting high on yourself from your own like revelations, the Rebbe was crying on the ground, rolling around, saying like, take it away, because I don't want your Gan Eden. I don't want your Olam Haba. The very fact that I'm in perception and in possession of those things means I'm lacking you. Because as long as I'm seeing light, it means that which I'm seeing is not essential, because I can understand it, I can experience it. If I can experience it, it means it's a limited revelation. And that's why we're bringing this in this part of the Maimer. Even someone who's sitting there and he has the experience of Shimon Bar Yochai, where the temple is like mamish happening for him, he's crushed because he knows that he's only dealing with mere revelations. Because if the essence was there, everybody would experience it. And this is why he brings this story of the Alter Rebbe at this time, because even in possession of saying the Maimer and mamish experiencing all the light, he's in that moment saying, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Olam Haba, I want you. I'm not impressed by my experience of being high and energetically connected and finding all the answers. Like that's not what's impressive here, because I'm crushed. over the fact that the essence of God is not here? How does it help the world if you are a big tzaddik and there's darkness all around you? You should. There's an element of mamish like torture and persecution, crushedness in that, and it's important to find that part. Not to be sad, God forbid. We have to be always serve Hashem with joy, but the reality is you have to serve Hashem with your essence. And if you're sort of like feeling chill and good to the point where you're not in touch with the fact that there is a glaring elephant in the room, which that Mashiach is not here and that the place of Mikdash is not built, and that gets lost on you, then you have yet further to go. And the fact that it says this language was heard from the Alter Rebbe, meaning to say it wasn't just heard once, it was like something that was heard frequently. It wasn't just special times. It was something all the time that Alter Rebbe apparently was saying. This was just like his MO. Now here's the man who is literally at the highest heights of creation, bringing us the light of Chabad Hasidus, the Tanya, the Bala Tanya, the Bala Shulchan Aruch. There was no more enlightened person in the world. And this is what was on his mind all day long. This is what he was busy saying all day long. I don't want light. We're in Gullus. And the fact that was already being said by the Alter Rebbe is one thing. The fact that the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, brought this to a state where he told all of us about it. And even it was printed, which means it's something relevant for every single person, every single generation. It's like he gave us the ability to hang on to a thread of the Alter Rebbe's coattails and also be crushed and unsatisfied no matter how high levels of revelation that we get. We know that it's not tapping into our essence, and therefore we're under Achashverosh's rule and we're crushed. And therefore it gives the power for every single Jew so that his main interest should be Giloy HaAtzmus. Right? That what do you want out of life? Not to be the most enlightened person in the room and the greatest Talmud Chacham and the most spiritually advanced. No, because the Tzemach Tzedek shared with us the Alter Rebbe's true desire, he empowered us that should also be our true desire, that all we want is you. We want the essence, that's our true inner desire. That's why I said, Chaim, you're crushed. I know you are, because the Alter Rebbe gave you the power that you're not satisfied with how many websites you build and any of it, right? You want atzmus u'mohus, take of miyad mamish in this world. Ad kedei kach, shachshav meir gilui zeh, k'she'ein meir gilui zeh, so much so that when this is not present and prevalent and shining, u'makol she'kein b'zman ha'galo she'ein meir afilu gilui, or she'ein b'zman ha'bayis, and how much more so when you're not even holding by the Alter Rebbe's light, you're not even experiencing light. And he says, for example, you're in Gullus and we don't even have the light. Forget about the luminary. We don't even have any light. So there's really nothing to be excited about at all in the first place. Then you put you in a matzav of kasis, of crushed. To the point that mevakesh gimel pamim b'chol yom, you request 3 times a day or more. Techazenu einenu meshuvach al tziyun barachmim. Right? May our eyes see your return to Tzion in mercy. Then when we will finally see revelation of God, and not only revelations, but essence of God come to the world. And this is Kasis Lama'or. This is our generation, so to speak, version of Kasis Lama'or. The Kasis, this notion of being crushed, not because there's anything wrong, not because there's anyone chasing you, not because you're not even able to do the mitzvah. You can't get to the mikveh. There's a story of Mendel Futterfass. He was in exile in Siberia, and they forced him to do harsh labor. And he took one time a job on a boat, which is very dangerous work. They had to go sailing into the whatever sea is over there, freezing cold waters. And all of a sudden one day, he's on the boat and he's doing the work and he just falls off the boat into the freezing cold water below. And he comes up and he talks to his friend. He's like, no, this is why I took the job. I haven't gone to the mikveh in months and months, maybe years. I need the mikveh. I took the job on the boat so I can fall in and get a mikveh. Right? So it's we have it easy. You can go to 4, 5, 6 different mikvahs at your will any time of the day you want. Right? So he said, this is the Indian of kasis of our generation. That all that doesn't do it for us. Right? We're just broken from the fact that Mashiach is not here and there's not full level revelation everywhere. And from this, actually, you can reach your essence. And even more so than if you were Mendel Futterfass not going to a mikveh. What he's trying to say, the Rebbe is encouraging. What's the job of the Raya Mehemna? the one who shepherds us our faith, is to explain to us how even we who are after Haman's house has been given over to Esther. And you know how many persecution, guess what? You have an even higher and deeper access to the essence of Hashem than your forefathers who we glorify because they stood at Mesiras Nefesh. Right? The job of the Rebbe is to show us that he's connecting to an even deeper essence. This that the will, the true desire of every Jew is total godly revelation, so that you can't live another day without it. You're just like tortured no matter how good it is for you. If Mashiach's not shining to you and you and you in every single country, in every single place, your very life is on the line. You can't live with yourself. This is why the Rebbe couldn't sleep, right? This is why the Rebbe couldn't eat. Because there's a person who actually lives this reality. You could say, oh, he finally got out of war-torn Europe, and he doesn't have to live the life of persecution on the run. He got on the last boat. It's coming up to Koach Sivan, right? He got on the last boat, literally, out of Nazi Europe. You think he'd get there and just chill and be like, take a breath. No, we're in Galus. The war goes on. You're simply crushed from the fact that in the time of exile there's not a full-blown revelation. Where does this come from? Where does this feeling come from? Mitzad etzam and neshama, right? The only way you would feel that way is if it was coming from the essence of your soul. Because if it was coming from any other part of your soul, you wouldn't feel crushed in a time of general goodness. It's only when you get down to who you essentially truly are that suddenly you realize that no matter how much I have, if I don't have Mashiach, there's something extremely wrong. I can't live like this, right? That's the only way you're going to experience that is if the essence of your faith was fed to you, right? Is if you're tapped into your true and essential nature. That's the only reason you're going to be slightly disappointed when you're sitting in Haman's house with all his wealth and gold and silver and mikvahs and kosher meat on every street. If you weren't tapped into your essence, that would satisfy you. But if you're tapped into your essence and you're a slave of Achashverosh, none of the revelations can satisfy you, no matter how great they are, even if it's beyond gold and silver, but it's Gan Eden and Olam Haba. It's not good enough. Because if I don't have God in full, I am crushed. And that reaches to the Ma'or of the Neshama, which is a connection to the essence of godliness itself. Okay? We'll pick this up next week then, gentlemen. Chazak u'baruch.